have one more interesting panel, that is the fourth panel. The fourth panel for the event today is on mainstreaming impactful models into formal school education. Our moderator for this session is Mr. P. CEO, Deshpande Skilling, will expertly lead us through the conversation, drawing our valuable insights from our panelists. Let's begin. It's my pleasure to introduce our distinguished panelists who bring a wealth of education and experience of today's conversation. Here goes our panelists. The panelists are Mr. Nilesh Nimkar, founder and director, Quest. Education field. Dr. Ravindra Gurwakar, technical director, Rajlakshmi Children Foundation and co-founder Pratibha Poshak. RCF Pratibha Poshak, professor in IIT, now in schools. Mr. Renes Joseph, founder and CEO, Ignis Careers Knowledge Partners for Skilling Village. Please join us in welcoming our esteemed panelists on the stage. Please give them a big round of applause. As they begin, a quick reminder to our audience.
Yeah, Mr. Praveen from Vivekananda European.
So audience, your questions are very important. After the panel discussion, we open the floor for questions. So be ready to participate. Over to Mr. PN9.
Hello, yeah. So good evening. So the last panel for the day. We'll try and make it the most interesting one. To start with, I am feeling in front of a tenderfoot in front of such a powerful panel here. My only qualification is that I attended school. So we have Mr. Nilesh, who spent 25 years in education. Is founder and director at Quest, working in the field of early childhood education, working with children for more than 25 years. Nilesh, am I right? Yeah. He's been recognized several platforms for what he's done. Our second panelist, very interesting, Mr. Ravindra, a graduate from IIT, was teaching at an IIT. At this age, he decided to leave all of that and teach children in schools. So, huge respect for you, Dr. Mr. Renes, founder, director at Ignis Careers. They work on content for schools. And he's been a partner of the content that we have developed for Skilling Village. So, welcome, Dr. Renes. And Mr. Praveen is with the Vivekananda youth movement. They are a very large, I'll leave some of it to them to introduce themselves. But the objective of the panel here today is in the social sector, somewhere we have identified very local problems in small towns, villages, mostly rural. And we are trying to address them. But each one of us will be addressing a very small part of the whole problem, the big problem. Somewhere, if this has to become really big, then it has to become mainstream. It has to become part of the education system. Unfortunately, what's happening today, you have to bear me out on this, is somewhere school education is it getting more aligned to what are the requirements of the urban crowd? There is this big aspiration to be joining the most prestigious institutes, and that's resulting in the curriculum at schools being raised higher and higher and higher, which is okay for an urban child where he or she has access to so much of resources. Parents at home can teach, a neighbor is there are tuition options. But if I look at a child in a village, at class 9, 10, learning trigonometry and whatnot, trying to find the height of some tower, I'm not too sure how right all of this is. And NGOs and other well-meaning organizations are trying to plug in some of this in their own ways. So what is the way out? Can we plug what we are doing into these school programs, or should we have a very different curriculum for urban, somebody who has very high aspirations and somebody who wants to just go to school? So these are the questions, broad questions that I have in mind, because the program that we run in village schools looks good, seems to be working in developing confidence. But then how far can we go? We are today in 250 schools, we might do 1,000 schools or 5,000 schools. But if I just take the count of schools in India, it's so large. And what's also happening is that in many schools, there are multiple NGOs going and approaching the same school. I want to do my program and somebody wants to do their program. So these are some questions that we have in mind. I thought we have a very good panel here. I think we have a very good panel. So, yeah, to you, Nilesh. So, what is your assessment of what's happening?
So, let me just react to what you said in the beginning. Should we have another curriculum, sort of a two-layer curriculum? My straight answer to that is no. I have been working with the rural children, tribal children for the past almost 25 years now. And I think that, I have seen hundreds of students studying in the schools, and they are very much capable of coping with the curricular demand, provided our schooling system really offers some kind of education. Let me just show, sort of tell you some numbers which will be sort of an proof for my point. We have something called diagnostic test, which is done in the grades 8, 5, 6, 7, to see that how much the child has learned over the past 5 years. If you see that there are, say, about 50%, 70%, 60% students who are trailing behind the grade levels, then the problem is not with the students, the problem is with the system. It's not really delivering what it is supposed to deliver. And I would like to emphasize here that this is not the case only with the rural schools, but we have been working in Mumbai. Now, there is by no means it is rural. But you will always find that at large the public systems seem to be dysfunctional. And that is the challenge that we all of us sitting from outside would feel that it's almost beyond the fix, but that's not the case. We as a society, let me give you another numbers. The largest private service provider in the preschool education has about 1,200 schools across the country. I come from a small district of Maharashtra called Palghar, which has about 3,700 preschools, and Maharashtra alone has a huge network of about 1,20,000 Anganwadis, which are supposed to serve as preschool. Now, if we really believe that education is the right of every child, then there is no other way than to really motivate the system. In fact, in India, what has happened is that the public education system, the government education system, is so much under attack that it has become a perception for everyone that it can never function. But if you really look at even progressive states like Maharashtra, Karnataka, Gujarat, and the down south, even today, 60-65% of our children are in public education system. And if that is the kind of case, then a lot of attention is really required over there. And with that hypothesis, we started quest about in 2007, and in the next round, maybe I talk a little about what exactly we could do. I don't say that everything is fine and great over there. A lot of work needs to be done. But if we reject this public education system, is there any other alternative for us? So that because the school education has to be at least the right of every child, and not only any type of school education, but an equitable school education. If that is our idea, if that is the idea of equity prevails in the social sector, then there is no other way than we can do away with the public school education system. We have to somehow fix it. The next round we will present a few cases how this could be done.
You are working with, you started working with kids from slums in Belgaum. So your experience, Ravi. Hello.
First of all, I would like to thank Deshwani Foundation and IJ in particular for giving me this opportunity to share a few of my experiences and insights about school education. I myself studied in a government school, and later I went on to study at IIT Bombay, which is here. And the earlier panel on talent for the new world order greatly emphasized, be it Mr. Modiraj or Dr. Ravi and other panelists, what's it going to look like after 5 years? That was quite scary actually. So many of them were hesitant to tell the truth very frankly. So if we continue to, so you asked about whether there should be like, whether we should teach trigonometry and algebra and other things. The answer, my view of that is, it's not about whether we teach them those things or not. That could probably, like an MEP says, people can have different streams or different levels at which they can take depending on their interest. But what's bothering me is how we are teaching these things, whether it is in rural setting or whether it's in urban setting. Most of the kids are studying for scoring marks, and even our government system. I was expecting the Commissioner of Education to be here. It would be nice, could directly give the feedback. So that is very sad. The assimilation is not there. The subjects are not being assimilated. It's just purely mugging up a few formulae, substituting the values and getting results. And this kind of education is going to be redundant. It is already redundant, I would say. So unless we change, unless we delve deeper and develop the abilities to reason out things, solve problems in diverse applications using these concepts and deeply assimilate these subjects, the system is failed, whether it is private or public. So that's my point of view.
So you're working on
Like the mic.
Couple of maybe two perspectives. My career can be sort of divided into two phases. First phase where I was working with one school or two schools, where you know every child like the back of your hand. And if you know a child is in middle school, you go back, find out the reason and solve that problem. But 7 years after I did that, I was pushed into a type of work where I was supposed to work with the government and look at how the government functions. Now, instead of thinking of one school, suddenly you are forced to think of 44,000 schools in Karnataka. Now you are no longer worried about one child, but you are worried about the system as a whole. You are worried about 16 teachers in India and the policy difficulties they bring in. So two aspects that I would want to highlight. When we look at a school as an individual entity, the challenges that we focus on are very student-centric and are easier to solve when we make a case-to-case decision. But when we look at a system as a whole, many of the time we are now dependent on the teachers to be taking the decision for us. And most cases we are not empowering our teachers enough. And when I make the statement from two perspectives. One is, with the little curriculum now, whether the curriculum should be different, yes, no, it's a different discussion altogether. But with the little curriculum that we do have, good, bad, separate discussion, are we dealing with it in a good enough manner is something that we need to be discussed. For example, if we had a good environmental science teacher, do you require a separate water sanitation hygiene in a curriculum? Do you have a good, if you have a good science teacher, do you still require a health and physical education curriculum? If we have a good SUPW teacher, do we require a STEM curriculum? So there is a tendency to push a lot of additional stuff into the curriculum by NGOs which are still taking the student-centric approach and are not looking at 40,000 schools. So that's, I think, a fundamental challenge which we need to address. The second thing is, as a system, we solve today's problem but create tomorrow's problem. To give you two examples here. When the country rolled out the Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan, we took a policy saying that there will be a school within 1 kilometer of every household across the country. When we achieved that target. When we did that, we started so many schools. Let's say we started in 1999. 50% of our schools today are lower primary schools. And we recruited teachers there. 50% of those schools actually have 50% of our children, but have only 24% of our teachers. And Karnataka as a state has not recruited a single teacher in that cadre the last 20 years. So if 24% of the teachers, that itself is a small number. If all of them are going to retire at the same time, where do we have the teachers? While that was a great target to have, that we will have a school within 1 kilometer of every household, it created the problem for tomorrow. As a system, we are not really focused on solving those problems, and I don't think any one NGO will be capable of even preempting that solution. So it requires, whenever we talk about policy, when we are looking at solutions at scale, also requires lots of heads at the table to argue about these solutions.
I can realize why some schools, when we go and talk to them, their request to us as an NGO is, can we provide teachers? So somewhere the challenge really is about shortage of teachers.
And we keep hearing data year on year that we have sufficient number of teachers going by the pupil-teacher ratio. So we play behind this game of averages and keep fooling ourselves that we have enough teachers.
So Ramesh, your thoughts?
See, I mean, as a country, we have the largest population in India. But are we converting them into assets? We need to address one question: what are we doing in classrooms? And I ask teachers always, what is that question you ask before you enter a classroom? And people say, am I prepared? Am I this? Am I that? No. How is this 40 minutes or 1 hour going to be useful for the students in their life? We don't ask that question. We teach them math which they don't apply. You teach them multiplication division class for 8 to 10-year-old children who haven't even counted something in real life in actuality. We don't even give money to them. And what are we teaching them for? We teach them language and we think that grammar is language. No. Empower them to speak. We don't make them speak and we teach them language. What is the point? They go through the whole system of silence, the 13 years in school, 5 years in college, and then one final say, go face the interview board. I mean, this is the question we need to ask. What are we doing? How is it going to be useful? The biggest waste of education is not, the money or anything. It's a time waste. Sometimes when I look back at my graduate days, 3 years, what did I do? Oh my God. Had I sold lemonade or peanuts, I would have made more money and, would have contributed more to the economy and paid more tax. I think we need to ask those questions. How is it going to be useful? Is this time valuably spent? We need to ask that question. We are wasting it.
So Praveen, so in the development sector, so many of us go and work in school. In fact, even in terms of CSR funding, one of the largest pool of that is directed towards schools. So something that all the effort that the NGOs are making, is it all directed in the wrong direction or should we be doing something else? Because somewhere we believe there's a problem and we would like to see what is the fix to that problem. And then, I'm talking of can we mainstream it. So, So are we going down the right track or?
You're making me a villain now. So, I will partially say yes to your question. I'll take one example. Let's take the case of STEM. Right? Now, the whole world seems to be driven by the STEM, and a lot of CSR money goes into STEM and STEAM and STREAM and so many variations of that. So, I was very curious, so I tried to find out where did this word STEM come from. And I realized that the National Academy of Sciences of the US came up with this paper where they defined STEM. And in 2005, they came up with a policy document saying that from a position of threat, saying that all their jobs, STEM jobs, are the most important for driving the economy, and most of their STEM jobs were being taken away by Asians. So they wanted to improve their education system, so they wanted to focus on STEM, for which one part of the big interventions was to have 10,000 science and maths teachers for 10 million students every year. Now we have copied that, right? And we have done a very fairly bad copy of it. We have taken the word STEM and tried to push it into our schools. Now they have said, okay, it's okay to copy them, but they have said to do well in STEM, you need to do well in science and maths. So they thought we have to get 10,000 science and maths teachers every year to teach these 10 million students in school. But we have left the idea of science and maths, and we are trying to teach engineering and technology at the school. We are not focusing on pure science and maths. And if you extend it further, we did one experiment in HD Kottakkal, where we were working with government schools. And we realized that students who learn Kannada well in grades 3 to 8 do well in science in grades 10 and 11. Now, I would be much more prudent in investing on language much more early to help them do well in science, hoping that they will do well in STEM areas much later. But we try to force fit STEM areas or STEM curriculum into schools at a much younger age. So I think somewhere the way we foresee a problem needs a bit of a change. Now, one part where there is a slightly different alternative to look at is when we are looking at universalization of education. That's where many of government problems are created. Government wants every kid in school, irrespective of whether they learn or not. Now that's a good target to have. But if you were to implement it, and let's say you want every kid in this age group of 6 to 18 years to be going to school, we try to come up with an engineering solution to that. Now, can you look at all the geographies and say that they fall into only a certain buckets of geographies? So, if you can create a 3x3 matrix, there are Gram Panchayats with high schools, there are Gram Panchayats without high schools, and there are Gram Panchayats with high schools which are being upgraded to Karnataka public schools on one axis. On the other axis, there are suburban areas, there are rural areas, and there are forest or tribal areas, where your rules of the game will be different. Now, across this 3x3 matrix, if we are able to demonstrate how universalization of school education can be achieved in 9 different variants, we would have solved the problem for 96% of the Gram Panchayats of Karnataka. It is possible to look at solutions there. Government doesn't invest on pilots. If as NGOs, if we can come together to invest on these pilots, then government has a template of 9 different models which can be implemented in 96% of the school, 96% of the Gram Panchayats. Maybe they can take it forward from there. I think we should be focusing more on pilots, less on scaling up ourselves. Scaling up should be done by the government. Demonstrating what can be done should be our job. Thank you.
Yeah, that was the question. Is there an option, or is there a case at all for programs or pilots being done by the not-for-profit sector to be mainstream?
So I would like to just present the case of one of our programs called PALI, which is aiming at strengthening the early childhood education system in Anganwadis. So Anganwadi is essentially a multi-purpose center, and the education service is the weakest one. And with the new education policy being rolled out, that needs to be strengthened. We have been working with the Anganwadis for almost now 18 years. And when we say about pilots, how do we really do the pilot for the system? So I mean, if I really set up a separate school and do some piloting work over there, it will work beautifully because everything is under control. So even the pilot for system is to be co-created with the system. So what we tried to do was that we approached the government and we decided to try it out with about one administrative unit. And that itself, the pilot itself should have sort of 500 Anganwadis to begin with. Because that's the pilot which is going to feed into the system much better than a very controlled laboratory kind of an experiment. So these pilots are also to be done at much larger scale, and that's something what we really require. In fact, we have come to a level now where we can say that the unit of planning for the state or maybe for the NITI is a district. So if we really take up one district and demonstrate a very robust model over there, that is something that can probably be scaled up by the government. The other why, because then you operate within all the constraints of the system. The second important point that comes up over here is that how do we really decide that our intervention, whatsoever it is, has made an impact? Because there are so many confounding intervening variables in between. How do we isolate our impact? So that was the question that with which we also started with Anganwadis, and the only solution that was made to us was to have a very strict control trial. Without which it's very difficult to say that, otherwise, there are several things happening at the same time. It's not a very laboratory kind of an environment. So there are several people working, there are several schemes coming in. How do we really sort of attach the outcome to your own intervention? So these are certain kind of things which are very critical when we do the pilots for the government system. We had strict control trials, one longitudinal and other two longitudinal trials, till we could really say that, okay, this intervention really works. And it was quite a strict trial with which, so we had an intervention group, and the sample that we tested was around some 2,000 children within a block, and then compare it to the non-intervention block, and then we could really see if there is a substantial difference, then it would really attribute it to your intervention. So it's almost like testing a pharmaceutical product. So unless you do that, it takes long time. So it's not possible that you do a pilot in 1 year or 2 years or 6 months and then ask the government to really take this up and scale it up. This is not going to be.